You are tuned into 1100 WSGI. This is Lee Marie with The Go Show. We are so happy that you are joining us. And in studio, we have back Miss Beautiful Pat Samler. Welcome back, Miss Pat.
Hello.
And also, we are very excited to have the Wild Doc back.
Yay.
Thanks. Good to be back.
And I'm so surprised that there's not a blizzard or something.
I know, right? It's like every Friday.
Exactly.
Once a month.
I warned people this Wednesday. I said, we have the Wild Doc scheduled. The weather looks clear. But so just know that a blizzard may fly in because he's coming in. So we are so happy that you're here.
Good to be here.
Awesome. So we have a short devotional to start with. Today is Friday, February 11th, and this is a special edition Go Show because, as you know, normally we are here on Wednesdays, but today is Friday. All right, here is your devotional. His peace is like a ray of golden light shining on you continuously. During days of bright sunshine, it may blend in with your surroundings. On darker days, his peace stands out in sharp contrast to your circumstances. See times of darkness as opportunities for his light to shine in transcendent splendor. He is trying to practice peace he is training you to practice peace that overpowers darkness. Collaborate with him in this training. Do not grow weary and do not lose heart. And these are taken from John 1:4-5 and Hebrews 12:3. So that is your devotional for today, Friday, February 11th. And so we are excited to have the Wild Doc. And, so many people have been asking me questions. They're like, the next time you have him on, can you ask him this? Can you ask him this? So, I got a list about this long. And I know that we don't have that much time. But I know that a couple of those questions got forwarded to you, so I didn't know if you would like to start with those, or if there is some other topic that you would like.
Staff gave me the one.
Oh, okay.
And I know that it was in the paperwork at the office on the desk.
Okay, no problem.
So it was about an individual was asking about they had their gallbladder removed, and I believe they were asking in request to specifics of what foods they could eat.
Right.
Pat,
yeah. What would be
send
good for that?
Ashley, that?
Yeah.
Do you have it wrote down?
Somewhere.
Read that.
So yeah, they also have
then
some some kidney issues and some pancreas issues.
Okay.
They just had their gallbladder out,
Yeah.
and they were wondering what is the best food to eat, for that.
So honestly, there's not a specific one.
Okay.
Because the issues they're having are not food related.
Okay.
So I pulled up a study, and it's spinal curvatures, visceral disturbances, and the relation thereto. Neville Usser, MD. This was published in 1933. All right? Mm-hmm. And I just want to read you this at the end. And I'm going to sum it up very quickly, but it's a history lesson. And it says, Dr. Usser has pointed out that the possibility of visceral disturbances being reflexly originated by pathological processes in the spine has received little or no consideration. And it's important. He also says plea is made for the general recognition of the role of spinal curvatures in the production of visceral disturbances. And visceral disturbances are your visceral organs, your kidneys, your liver, your gallbladder, things like that. And it goes through, and it has even old school images of people with poor posture. Women with poor posture have spinal curvatures. They identify where those spinal curvatures are.
We both sit up.
I know, right? And it goes through women having their ovaries removed, that normal ovaries, having ovarian pains, even cysts forming, but then cysts would disappear and come back and forth, back and forth. Normal ovaries, normal uterus, normal gallbladder, normal appendix, normal portions of their stomach, things like that. Organs removed when there was nothing wrong with the organ. Now, when an organ needs to function properly, like the gallbladder, it can build up with stones when it doesn't function. So he goes through and explains how even people would have these organs removed, still retaining some of the problems that persisted that the doctors, MDs, would say would be gone if they remove the organ. It'd be kind of like, so the important thing I want people to understand is, think about it this way. Would you think a nephrologist, okay, a kidney specialist, was the most brilliant specialist for kidneys if you went in with kidney stones and you had horrible pain because of kidney stones and they said, well, we'll just remove your kidneys? Would you be like, brilliant, let's do that right now?
No.
Why not?
Because you need them.
Why do you go to another specialist who then removes the gallbladder because it has stones? Because it's painful. Because it doesn't function well. It's truly sad that the person's already had this procedure done. When the number of people that I've saved from having that surgery, I have no clue. It is so many.
Wow.
And sadly, a lot of people that I haven't had the opportunity because they ask for the information after they've already had the procedure. But I just want people to think about that. It is ridiculous that we're still removing organs from the human body thinking that is going to bring health. Because in this doctor, in 1933, pleading with the medical establishment and other doctors, chiming in, saying we need to look at spinal curvatures before we ever remove an organ from a human body. Because the function of that organ is dependent on the central nervous system, which is integrated, and the pathway through which the brain communicates to that organ is through the spinal column. If that spine is out of alignment, puts either tension or pressure on those nerves, and the organ will malfunction, not function properly. Restore function by removing those alignment problems in the spine, removing tension or pressure, enabling better communication, better function. Function is restored, and you keep your organs that you need. And I'll give them hope. I want to give them hope for it's not like, oh my God, there are other good things they could be doing.
Well, and it sounds like they
to
should
support
definitely come in
flow.
to get that curvature, help.
And especially when they have multiple organs. I had a girl who was sent home to die by Vanderbilt Children's Hospital. Vanderbilt sent him home to die, said the girl had about 3 months to live, but to get things in order because she's dying of multiple organ failure, for which the best doctors at Vanderbilt could not do anything about it. They said it's just shutting down. We don't understand why, but your daughter is going to pass.
Wow.
She's still alive.
Wow.
And it's like, they thought she had a gallbladder problem. Then she, and it went from one organ to another organ being diagnosed with all these organ problems. And then, they're just failing. They're just shutting down. What control? If I cut the nerves to your gallbladder, what happens to it? It shuts down. If I cut the nerves to go to your heart, what happens to it? It shuts down. If I cut the nerves to go to your intestinal tract, it shuts down. If I cut the nerves to go to your ovaries, they shut down.
So can you explain a little bit more about that whole process of with the spinal curvature and the process of what nutrients or messages or
So it's electrical generated messages from the brain to the organs, from the organs to the brain, and actually a lot of the information goes from the organ systems, and the brain is receiving information. It processes that information like a computer would, and then sends back signals to those organ systems to adapt to whatever needs to happen for that specific situation. So your gallbladder, your liver, your pancreas. Pancreas is a good one. Most people understand the regulation of blood sugar. So you have to produce insulin, release that into the bloodstream. Also, there's pancreatic enzymes. So what happens is when you consume something, you have receptors on your taste buds that not only just say, oh, they're pleasure, that I like what I'm eating. It sends receptors up, how much sugar's in there. It's analyzing the content of the food, from minerals to proteins to sodium to sugars. All those things are being analyzed as soon as it hits your tongue. It's not just for us to feel good about the food and like to eat something tasty. It's analyzing that information. And we get joy out of the way it analyzes it because we think our taste buds are just there for ooh, that tastes good. The brain is using those receptors, receiving that information, and then it's sending signals to the intestinal tract on how much acid to produce, how much pancreatic enzymes, specific enzymes to produce according to the protein or the fiber or the makeup of that food. And you want that system to be integrated so well that it's doing things so precise that you're getting the best quality nutrition out of the food you're eating.
That's okay. Yeah, totally.
And it is. So and it's just sad that people are still having what I would consider barbaric age procedure's done,
So I guess that maybe the silver lining to this situation, since this person already had it out,
Yeah.
might be that, they should go for spinal help
Yeah.
because that will help those other organs, right? The pancreas and the liver that they're also having, also having problems with.
Let me just read this because this is exactly what she said. She said, a couple of days ago, I had my gallbladder removed. I was also told I have scarring on my pancreas, probably due to swollen gallbladder. I have been told that my kidneys aren't great either. Can you tell me what foods I should eat? FYI, the surgeon told me to take 3 ibuprofens 3 times a day for 3 days to keep down the inflammation.
So turmeric is a phenomenal herb for both liver function, inflammation, and those things. So something God's provided us with is that herb right there.
Okay.
And it's not going to be detrimental to the kidneys, like ibuprofen can.
Right. Okay. Good to know.
So when you look at that, she's having inflammation around that region. And that's what happens oftentimes is your gallbladder could be there. And your gallbladder, anybody ever butchered a deer? The gallbladder is like this little thin, you got to be so careful not to tear it open. It's just a thin, very soft sac. There's no way the gallbladder swollen caused the scarring on the pancreas. There's no abrasiveness to that. It's an inflammatory response happening in that region of the body.
Wow.
And that's where you can get what's called neurogenic inflammatory response or neurogenic inflammation. Nerves generating inflammation when they are being irritated. Wow. So that's why a lot of times carpal tunnel and things like that are neck problems, not in the carpal tunnel. It's in the neck. It causes inflammation in the carpal tunnel. And then you get pain and symptoms down in the hands. If you relieve pressure.
That reminds me of it was over 20 years ago now. It was probably 30 years ago. I almost had carpal tunnel surgery.
Yeah.
Because I was having these terrible pains, in both hands. I was sleeping with hand braces on. It was just dreadful. And but luckily, it was scheduled to happen.
Yeah.
And I thought, I'm going to go to see one more doctor. And I saw the doctor, and he asked me how my job was. Was it stressful? I said, yes. He said, can you get transferred to a different location? I said, well, yeah, I can. I can go to any store that I want. So I went down from like a top 10 store to like number 75 on the list. So it was totally no stress at all. All of the pain was gone within 24 hours. These braces that I wore for 1 year, I never had them on my hands again. I almost had surgery.
Wow.
And it was stress related.
Think about it. You ever see somebody stressed? Their shoulders. She looks in the mirror every day. But your shoulders are uptight, and guess what? If I pull my shoulders up, the muscles that attach to my shoulders attach to where so that my shoulders can elevate. They attach to my skull and through my cervical spine. So if there is a force, for every force there is an equal and opposite force.
Okay.
So if this force goes up, there's an equal compressive force down on my cervical spine. So if there is chronic compressive forces on your cervical spine, what are you going to do to the nerves in your neck? And also just even the muscles through which the nerves have to wind and trace through to go down into the arms through the brachial plexus here, between your clavicle and your shoulder blade, right in here. All of those can get tight, and that's where the nerves branch through, weave through down your arm. So anytime you put additional pressure, whether it be through muscle tension or through spinal problems, neurogenic inflammation and pain into the carpal tunnel.
When are the regular, medical doctors going to catch on to all of this? Like,
I honestly don't expect it. There's too much money in surgeries. You look at the evidence in utilizing chiropractic care for every level of spinal deterioration, disc disease, herniations. There are times when surgery is necessary when you have like a true broken back, a dislodged, dislocated spine, something like that, typically traumatic. Sometimes you have broken pieces of disc that have come off floating in the spinal column, and just pulling those out, getting them out of the way so that healing can occur then after is good. But you look at like fusion surgeries, we have a government committee on fusion surgery. And this government committee of 9 spinal surgeons, 3 of which owned patents, on the spinal equipment they would implant. Now, despite 3 of them, of the 9, having known conflicts of interest financially, they voted on a scale of 1 to 5, and it was a 1.5 on its effectiveness. 5 would have been really effective and really necessary. A 1 would have been non-effective. 1.5.
Wow.
And guess what? They were set to shut down the reimbursement through Medicare for spinal fusion surgery for things like degenerative disc disease and arthritis in the spine and chronic lower back pain. They were set to shut down Medicare government funding for those procedures because they deemed them more harmful than good for the majority of people. The National Association of Spinal Surgeons lobbied to our government, got the majority of the funding for that government committee shut down. So an independent profit organization got to lobby to our Congress members to shut that down. And so they didn't defund Medicare's reimbursement for those procedures, and they can continue doing it. And it's well written within the medical literature. It's well written. It's disgusting what takes place, what happens to people. I mean, you think cancer is expensive. You think pain is the most profitable industry for hospitals. Pain, spinal surgeries, things like that.
Wow. Well, it seems like lately we've just heard of so many friends that we know that, keep going back for more tests and more tests at these hospitals. They keep rushing in because they have these terrible pains. And all that they're being told is, we have to do another test. We can't figure out what it is. And, have you ever thought of starting like some workshops for doctors or classes? Because somebody needs,
If you can get them there, go ahead.
I mean, I know it's
Most doctors don't like what I just said. Despite everything I can point out with scientific evidence and research, they don't like that I just pointed out that an industry is not doing what's best for people.
Yep.
That it's truly, truly, truly sad.
But I mean, I just feel that, it's not all about the money for somebody out there that's listening, or maybe you have
and
a
if they want
contact.
to come out, reach out to me, the Wild Doc, or the Wild Roots Wellness, and I'll gladly help. I mean, I have. I have pediatricians that come to me, primarily one right now. I have a nurse practitioner. I have a PA, physician's assistant, who can prescribe medications. They can kind of see patients on the same level as a medical physician would. They just need about 5% of their notes, or maybe 10%. It's a certain percentage. Each of those, a PA or a nurse practitioner has to have a full MD sign off on their notes to basically say they're doing things properly. And they love what I do. They love what I teach. And they're just like, you can't even try and discuss this within the hospital.
Right.
Concerns they have on alternative methods and things like that. It's just, it is. I mean.
Well, kind of along those lines too, how do you suggest red pilling just people in general? Because, I know some people that I would love for them to go to you, but they heard all the same things that I heard when I was little, and that was, chiropractors are quacks, they're going to break your neck, and that's it,
Yeah.
because they were demonized.
I find that documentary doctored or bought. Documentaries bought, documentaries doctored.
Okay, bought is one of them,
Yep.
and then doctored is the other one.
Yeah.
Okay.
And bought is more about how the system is bought. And then another one is not chiropractic specific. And bought isn't really chiropractic specific either. Doctored is more chiropractic specific. But it's Escape Fire. Escape Fire is the concept. It's a really good documentary. They actually trace the situation with a Fort Campbell soldier that had been blown up, injured in battle, how they just almost killed the guy with narcotics. He went through real bit rehabilitative things, acupuncture, meditation, yoga, different physical therapies, and got off all these medications, nearly got his life back. He was still dealing with some bulging discs where I was like, I wish they would have integrated chiropractic there. But chiropractors, one of the reasons I feel like we are like the outcasts of the medical or medicine is because people like myself, we don't like we want the whole ship to turn around now. We don't want to wait. People can't wait for that. You know, people are having their gallbladder taken out when they shouldn't. You know, people are having the surgery today when they shouldn't. They didn't need to, you know, and so we want it to turn around now. You know, there's a lot of other professions that are kind of like, well, we're going to come in, so we're not going to speak about the wrong being done, where chiropractors have for the longest of time been open about speaking up against the wrong being done. You know, the opioid crisis in this country, some of the most verbal, opponents to the use of opioid medications are chiropractors and have been for so much time. I mean, the average person, military soldier, was under a few weeks of care, and it was like a 48% reduction in their need for pain medications. You know, so how many soldiers could we keep off of pain medications, no longer at risk of addiction, and thus then suicide and so many problems? You know, so. Yeah, I wanted to speak on what that lady could do. So there's not really any specific foods. I'd already mentioned turmeric, but really what she wants to look at doing is supporting liver function now. And what she can do, there's even supplements that can be taken that can be replacement, because bile is good for absorption of fat-soluble vitamins that are necessary for your overall health. And you kind of mentioned it, where it's like, again, people are going to doctors with pain or problems, and they can't figure it out. And even when they do, a lot of times it's either cut the organ out or we give you treatments for the symptoms of the problem. And so what happens a lot of times, you have these, more systems start to fail, more systems become diseased. So if she can work on overall liver function, there's some great liver herbs. Sandra's one of them, turmeric's another, for inflammation and with liver function. And dandelion root, Oregon grape. These are all God-made medicines that help in stimulating better bile flow, because they would have to hook up the bile duct back to, even though they removed the gallbladder. So she'll leach a little bit of bile back in, but she won't have that large contraction of bile into her digestive tract when she consumes food, and especially more fatty foods. So she won't be able to absorb as much fat typically. Now, there are the flip side, where there are some people who actually like excrete excessive amounts of bile. So it can be like a hyper, there's hyperthyroidism and there's hypothyroidism, there's low or there's high, so depending on what exactly is going on. And there's ways to analyze the digestive tract through stool sampling to analyze if she's having hyper or hypo type release of the bile, through looking at fat staining and things like that. So you can assess, should we be using more bitters to increase bile flow? A good bile duct herb is going to be artichoke. So doing those herbs can help her body function, and that's what she needs to get back to. And those are supportive. But again, if I cut the nerves to go to her liver or gallbladder, so if she has that nerve pressure, those herbs may be stimulatory and supportive, but you still need to unpinch those nerves. You need to get pressure off those nerves.
Okay. And then, of course, getting alignment.
Yeah.
Adjustments.
Yep. So taking care of the underlying cause of why, and if she became, and if the situation was a result of, and typically with inflammation of the pancreas and things like that, her situation would not be this. But when you look at, and it could be partially, I don't want to say it would not be, but it could be partially due to factors such as fatty liver disease and excessive cholesterol. Now, cholesterol isn't the bad guy, but because the liver and gallbladder excretes excessive cholesterol for removal, if you're those stones can be buildup of cholesterol within the gallbladder. So improving liver function, metabolic disorder, things like that. And again, reducing the inflammation that causes the necessity of increased cholesterol. And again, that comes back to diet. So diet is overall beneficial, but there's not like a specific food she needs to eat,
Okay.
Artichokes might be good,
All right, okay.
Turmeric, coconut curry chicken, organic chicken, and just, eating healthier. I mean, eat clean, eat healthy, go back. One of the statements I make to most of my clients when talking about nutrition, I'm like, if you could just say, could I prepare this food in my own kitchen, if these things grew around here. So how close is it to the way in which God created that food or that material or that plant material, whatever it is? Could I raise it, grow it, pluck it and peel it, and make it myself just the way God intended it to be? Or do I need a factory and equipment and chemicals and things like that to process and manufacture it? If you need something that you couldn't do within your own kitchen, practically, and again, and that's within a scale, you know what I mean? Sometimes you're like, well, I don't have the ability, I don't have a still to make alcohol. We use alcohol and tinctures for extraction, but in essence, you could really do those things. You can do a lot of things. So there's certain processes that you could do on your own. You just don't have the money to buy the equipment or those types of things. So there's circumstances I'm talking about, but it's kind of simple. Simply just eat things the way God intended us to receive it, from nature or from the ground or from the tree.
All right. So we're at the bottom of the hour. So what I'm going to do a couple schedule things and that are coming up. And while I do that, Pat, you can give him that other question that had come in case he wants to see if there's anything on that. And then I'd also like to talk about aluminum after that if we can. So today is the 11th of February. And what do we have tonight? Tonight over at Fluellen Church, they are having a community Valentine dance for mother, son, father, daughter. And so this is at 6 to 8 p.m. tonight at Fluellen Church. It's at 3357 Fluellen Road in Springfield. And it is free. They will have refreshments and also portraits being taken. And so, take your smalls out and have a great time tonight at Fluellen for their Valentine dance. And then tomorrow morning, not last Wednesday, but the Wednesday before, 24, Robert's Gate knocking at my door. We had on Pastor Joe Ray from the AIM Church. He is having a free life planning goal setting workshop tomorrow, 8:30 to 1:30, and this is free. It includes lunch. This is at 3301 Highway 31 in White House. And if you didn't catch Pastor Joe Ray's segment, you really should. Go to the WSGI page and check that out because I had never met him before, and he is awesome. And it sounds like his church is just right on, very Bible-based church. And so I'm excited. I'm hoping to make it to this. So that, again, is tomorrow, 8:30 to 1:30, includes lunch. It's at the AIM Church. And if you want to go to their website, to register or see more information, it's theaimchurch.com. So THEAIM church.com. And that is in White House, Tennessee. And then on that is Saturday morning. Saturday night at 6:30, our favorite place, Murph's, is having a Valentine dance. And I think it's like $7 or $8 to get in. Last year it was super fun. They even had a dance contest with prizes. And so Murph's is all ages. They do serve, they do have food for sale. And you can call ahead if you have a group and you want to get a table. You can do that. So Murph's this Saturday, 6:30 is the free line dance classes. That goes till 7:30. Then the live band starts at 7:30. I think it goes to like 10-ish or something. And super fun time for the whole family. So Murph's this Saturday Valentine dance. And then, of course, Sunday is the Super Bowl, right? Go Rams, all right? And yes, I heard some churches are telling people, hey, go ahead, wear your football jersey to church. Just make sure you make it to church. And then on Monday, which I know Laverne mentioned this, but I got to mention it too, what better place, Monday is Valentine's Day. So what better place to take your Valentine than to the Robertson County Tennessee Firearms Association Valentine Potluck? So we are having it at the American Legion in Greenbrier, which is 2730 Highway 41 in Greenbrier. So again, that is Robertson County TFA Valentine Potluck this Monday, 6 p.m. starts the dinner, 6:30 starts the program, and the speaker is going to be Judge Joel Perry, who he's worked for the County of Robertson for 25 years. Yeah, last 7 years he's been the General Sessions Judge. Before that, he was an Assistant District Attorney. So we're really looking forward to hearing him. He's going to be our speaker again this Monday, 6 p.m. at the American Legion in Greenbrier. All ages welcome. There is no charge for that either. So we hope to see you out at one of those things. So now we're getting back to our guests in studio. We have the Wild Doc. He is in Clarksville. And his organization is Wild
Wild
Roots.
Roots Wellness.
Wild Roots Wellness. All right. And the website or phone numbers?
Wild Roots Wellness right now, I think, is under construction still. Okay. And then just the phone number for the office is probably the best way to reach us is going to be 931-591-2010.
And repeat that?
931-591-2010. And then, like, if the woman needed herbs and things like that, I do health coaching. If she's looking for dosages and things like that are important, starting small, kind of analyzing, that's the thing is even like with the next question, there's certain questions I have for that individual. What can I do? There are some things that we can do good, but person by person, dosages change. Strategies can change according to history, according to likely underlying probable causes of the situation. So,
and I just want to clarify, he said that Wild Roots is under construction, but that's just the website, not their office. Their office
right.
is open, so I'm going to clarify that.
People's spines are under construction.
So yes, their office is open. It's just their website that is under construction.
Yep.
All right. So our next question that came in had to do with postnasal drip, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
There was somebody saying that they had postnasal drip for the last year.
That's a long time.
69-year-old female. What can you suggest that might try to help? So we started this one off of, look, what could you try? Echinacea is a really good herb for the integrity and resiliency of our mucosal membrane within our sinuses. Congestion, nasally, things like that. As there's excessive mucus, usually echinacea is a really good warming and drying herb for the mucosal membrane of the sinuses. And if you're going to supplement echinacea, it needs to be the root, and it should be tincture form is going to be the most potent and effective.
For people that don't know what that means,
tinctures are going to be alcohol extraction. So you're going to take the root material, grind it up, you're going to place it in a bottle of alcohol, usually 40% plus. The higher potency is going to extract more. It's a solvent, so it kind of dissolves the materials and extracts those chemical compounds from the leaf or plant material, the roots especially, and you extract that, and then you take that in a more potent dose through a tincture form.
And you have those little bottles with the little dropper
and they're
things.
going to be, so when you take, because I've had people, they're like, oh, we have some echinacea at home. And I'm like, all right. I grabbed a bottle. I'm like, here, try this real quick. And they're like, whoa, my mouth is on fire. Like, not fire like spicy. It's a very tingly. It's a tingling sensation to the mucosal membrane and the tongue. So if it doesn't have that, those alkaloids, then it's a very non-potent, or it's just not the right part of the plant. So leaf material, because echinacea is a taproot, those roots pull a lot of minerals. The leaves are very mineral dense, and they can be used for certain purposes there. Same thing with like dandelion. Dandelion leaves have more minerals and nutrients than spinach or kale or anything like that. And they actually can be used as bitters, ate directly after pulling the leaves of dandelion. So don't spray the dandelions.
All right. Okay, so echinacea is something definitely she should try.
Yeah, I would start with echinacea. Yep. And that's a very safe herb. Really doesn't have, any significant contraindications when it comes to medications and things like that. I do have to say, don't just take my advice and go out and grab an herb and start taking it. Review that with somebody who is knowledgeable both with herbs and the contraindications, certain medications and things like that. I can help you with that if you'd like, so, and then dosages and things like that can fluctuate according to individual, and sometimes you do more higher dosages for a short period of time, and high maybe, a half teaspoon or even a full teaspoon, several times a day, depending on the severity of the situation. In her situation being a year long, you could probably even start at maybe a quarter teaspoon, but again, specifics could be discussed, in a consultation. But that's a really good herb. Reishi mushrooms are a really good herb for the mucosal membrane immune system. So those are good adaptogenic herbs and mushroom. And then from there, what is causing it? The worst case scenario would be something like mold exposure. You're exposed to mold within the home, so you're constantly having something that is causing inflammation to the mucosal membrane, and your body is producing excessive mucus to try and shield. Mucus can be, fluid can be this this fluid shield against a particulate, a pathogen, making contact with your the actual cells of the membrane of the sinuses or airways or your digestive tract or whatever it may be, and your body's producing that as a shield. And so is that what's going on? So asking questions and figuring that out is always going to be allow the person to seek the best treatment strategy and strategy to remove the underlying factor and causes. From a chiropractic standpoint, abnormal function of the sinuses, usually you're going to look at C1, C2, and occiput alignment, that upper cervical alignment that can affect the cranial nerve tone because of rotational components in the upper cervical spine can affect that.
Okay. Yeah, I had never heard of like someone having that for a full year.
Yeah.
But I guess
actually
that's.
have had that.
Oh, have you?
Yeah.
All right.
A long time.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Which hopefully...
Getting over with.
Okay, so then the other question that came up was about aluminum.
Yeah.
And we've all been hearing, for years, stop using deodorant with aluminum.
Yeah.
So we've all stopped that. But then I was just thinking, because I don't know if you saw that doctor I forwarded last night on Telegram, but he was talking about aluminum being like one of the 4 things to just make sure to get rid of it. And so I was curious if like using aluminum foil or drinking out of aluminum cans, do we get aluminum from that too?
Yeah, to a degree. Yeah.
Okay.
Some cans are going to have plastic lining within them, so then, if they're not BPA free, you're getting the chemicals from the plastics. But especially when you cook with some aluminum, that's why you don't cook with aluminum pans anymore.
Oh.
So if you're cooking with aluminum foil, you're still cooking with aluminum.
Okay, so do not cook with aluminum. All right.
Yeah.
Okay, because I did not know that, and I've used some aluminum pans.
And heat and fatty foods are going to extract more of those metals. They're going to absorb.
Aye.
So it's worse in those situations. So
Wow. Okay. The other thing that he was talking about, and I haven't even, mentioned this to you yet, so maybe this is a topic for another show, but it just reminded me. And he was talking about the effects of like Wi-Fi and 5G and all that on our cells, and
Yeah.
not to like be charging phones in your bedroom overnight and stuff like that. Do you have anything that you want to add to that?
I mean, we had the electrician go back through the house for each bedroom where we have a single switch that cuts all electricity within the bedrooms. So we don't have that way. We don't have a wire right behind our head, and we can turn our Wi-Fi off and things like that. I mean, electromagnetic radiation is an issue. I mean, in plant studies and things like that, it can have a negative effect on, anything from bacteria to plants. It has an effect on our body. I think the research is just up and coming in what we're going to be able to see the detrimental effects. There's more and more research and anecdotal, situations where women having their cell phone in their bra right here, and then they wind up with a tumor right at the location where they always kept their cell phone, and again, those are anecdotal reports, but that is a piece of evidence. That is science first is observation. You observe what happened. Could that, and then you ask a question of, could that be the result of what was going on around that area or whatever? And then you start compiling multiple cases, and then you start looking, and then you start testing. But science is first observation. So I know a lot of people would be like, they'll poo-poo that, but it's like, this is a huge industry, does not want any negative publicity to occur within people wanting to go back to landlines and things like that.
So for the general population that can't rewire their house this week,
Yeah, right.
what advice can you give people, like as far as like should their Wi-Fi spot, should you just try to put it, turn it off at night?
Turn it off at night is what I would suggest. Turn it off at night. You're not using it. Try and turn it off. It'll save electricity. Put your phones on airplane mode whenever you can. Things like that. So, yeah.
All right.
And there are things out there that are EMF protectors and things like that. So, I mean,
What are the best EMF protectors?
I mean, I don't have one right offhand.
Okay.
So that's one that I think we are wanting to, partner with somebody at some point in time in the near future with the clinic, and carry those. But we just haven't done all that homework just yet.
Okay.
I have a friend of mine who's done a lot of that homework, and we have that file sitting there that needs to get done. So I apologize that I don't have
no
that
problem.
information right off the bat.
Here that's supposed to do
Yeah.
that, but I don't know if it works or not.
And there are ones. I mean, my buddy had an EMF detector, and it was cool because you can go around and look for high areas of EMF, and then you can take those EMF absorbers or
Yeah.
reducers, and you can test with an EMF detector. You put it on the cell phone. Like, I've been to chiropractic conferences and things like that, and EMF detectors or protectors, and they'll have the EMF detector, and they'll wave it over your cell phone, and it's real high, and then they put the reducer on your cell phone underneath the case, and they bring it in, and it's reduced. So it's
interesting.
It's pretty cool stuff. And I mean there are and people are like, well, that's just weird, and it's like, well, I mean, there's actually rocks that absorb energy from EMFs, and then they can glow in the middle of the night. So it's like, and you think about that stuff, it's like God made those rocks.
So that reminded
able to
me.
do that.
All
So it's
matter
like,
has a memory.
yeah, and it's pretty cool stuff sometimes.
So that
you
reminded me
learn.
of a couple things, because I don't know if this is real. I was watching a video, on social media, and it had somebody was holding their phone, and they had a detector of whatever. Like, so say my phone was in this hand, and they put the detector in this hand, and there was nothing. Then they put the phone charger into the phone, so it was charging, and they were holding it. And then they put the little detector on the hand, and it like doo doo doo, like, so it could tell that.
Goes through the channels through the body. Yep. Oh yeah. No, and you can even do with games with the voltmeters. So you can hold on to a voltmeter. It's pretty fun. You can hold on to a voltmeter just sitting there with like shoes on, and you'll have volts on your body. And then you basically bring your computer closer to you. The voltage as you're holding the voltmeter goes up. Uh-oh. But then you put the volt... EMF? No. I'm kidding. What are you doing to us? No. But then this is the room that's like, it needs EMF protectors, you would say. I mean, you can do the voltmeters in the air, and nothing, you can bring them close to the computer, nothing happens. You touch it, and the voltage with electronics near you increases, but that's coming through your body.
Wow.
And what's really cool is then you take your shoes off and you put it in the soil, especially damp soil, not like your desert dry soil. You need something of dampness to it, or grass, and you'll see that voltmeter go almost to zero. So it allows that electricity, that
Grounding.
energy to be, it's called grounding. So there's a ground plug in your outlets, and I have these, they look like long slinkies, the old school, wired cords, and it's just a ground plug, and you plug it into the ground wire outlet. It can't plug into the other two that have electricity.
Yeah.
People make a mistake, but it's like you plug in the ground plug, and then you can have this. It's just a Velcro strap with a metal tab that then touches your skin, and you can be grounded.
Wow.
And then there's grounding
I have
mats
one of
that
those.
Do
people
you?
have for underneath their children's bed and things like that.
Wow, I'll look into that.
So there's some pretty cool stuff out there to reduce the EMF. And there are people that are very sensitive to EMF, that chronic migraine sufferers, chronic anxiety, a lot of neurological type symptoms. That's something you want to check as a possible underlying factor and cause. I mean, I have a nurse practitioner who's a patient of mine, and she is so sensitive to EMF that it will almost, she's like, my brain starts tingling if I get into high EMF areas, or near like Wi-Fi routers and things like that, and it will start triggering a migraine. And so she has to kind of guard against that. And so some people are very sensitive to it, because it is an energy, and our body interacts with that energy. It has an effect on our cells.
So I know that I've heard that, going out barefoot in the
Yeah.
dirt is good it gets you back grounded.
Yep.
Do you have your kids do that every so often, or?
I don't every day.
Every
'Cause
day?
I don't think they ever wear shoes. It's like half the time we go, like, what was it, last night I picked the two girls up from grandma's, and I'm like, all right, where's Ren's shoes? I don't think she brought any. I'm like, well, they never wear shoes, so. Yep. I mean, we let our kids run wild and free out there on the farm. So
So
I
how
have a
long do you
question,
need
too,
to?
before we're
Okay,
done.
okay. How long do you need to, walk barefoot in the dirt to get the grounding effect?
I mean, there's the general statement of try and do that 15 minutes a day, but there's not really any science that says like this is the dosage that is needed for X, Y, or Z outcome. There's nothing on.
Do you
that
get
yet.
any benefit by putting your hands in the dirt? I was just
Yeah.
wondering.
I mean, and there's so many different benefits to it. I mean, there's
can lay in it.
and like for the lady with the postnasal drip or sinus issues and things like that, we carry an ion biome. It's a carbon molecule found in really healthy soil, and because we don't get to work really healthy soil these days, we don't get a lot of that black style dirt looking dirt that has a lot of that rich carbon molecules in it, and when you're working the dirt, you're breathing that in, and there's even soil-based probiotics, and there's things like that as you're working the ground and out there with your hands in the dirt. I've even got studies of individuals, and there's multiple therapeutic effects to gardening, but people with chronic depression and things like that, and they did studies on directly gardening, the benefits of that, and then trace some of the level of improvement in cognitive health to supplementing with the probiotic strains that are found in healthy soil. So actually ingesting them. So if you're out there working the dirt and your soil is healthy and not chemically sprayed, and then all the bacteria and different things are killed off or damaged, and you're not just strip tilling, and if you till it up, it becomes that more of a brown rather than a black dirt, and there's less microbes and fungi and worms and things like that create that environment for that good healthy microbiome or that microbiota in that soil. You don't get all that. So if you were to work that nutrient rich, carbon rich, that bacteria rich soil, you're breathing some of that in, you're touching it on your hands, and then you're going to ingest some of it indirectly. I'm not saying pick up dirt and put it in your mouth, but I mean, it's like it was so actually healthy for kids, when their GI and their gut was developing. It's actually really healthy for them.
I was just thinking about how much healthier our kids must have been, back in the day. I know I used to make mud pies all the time with the pie tins,
Yeah.
and we used to play outside in the dirt all the time. And now it seems like now
Look
our
at the
kids.
cognitive, neurological, mental health conditions plaguing children of this generation. I think it's like 1 in 5 children have a mental health disorder. It's insane. It's so
I was
sad.
shocked when I used to work for a eye doctor, and I was a doctor's assistant, and then I became an optician. But at the time, I had to interview all the people coming in. I could not believe how many children that came in that were on Redland, and all these,
Yeah.
I mean, literally over half.
And to
Probably
prove
two-thirds.
and to kind of put something significant out there that I think lends proof to the effects of the microbiome, the gut health on mental health disorders, they have done experimentation, and it called experiment. Experiment sometimes is a bad connotation to it. Oh, why would you experiment on kids? You're trying to help save these kids' lives, and prevent them from committing suicide and continuing a life of suffering with a mental health disorder. And they've gone as far as doing what's called a fecal transplant. So actually taking from a individual has a healthy microbiome and scanning their systems with blood tests and things like that to verify that they have no pathogenic viral illnesses or something like the hepatitis or whatever, or HIV, So they do that so they know that they're giving it healthy individual, but mentally healthy individual, taking their feces, encapsulating it, putting it in a capsule,
And swallowing it.
and the person with the mental health disorder swallows it and improves.
Oh wow, interesting.
And it's more effective than the
You've always
drugs
said that, the gut.
in healing the condition. You know what I mean? Like
The
it
gut and the
can,
brain,
it's
right?
not like you take that every day as a drug. You have to take feces capsules for the rest of your life like you need to take the drug. No, it's because you're actually changing the microbiome. And then there's other ways to do it where it's inserted rectally. And it's just to do that in major university hospitals to evaluate, what if we do this? Because they look at the state of the gut and the immune system in people with chronic and unexplainable, there are people who But even going to this extent where it's like a soldier that's witnessed things overseas, or somebody who lost their father when they were 8 years old, the resiliency of that individual can be increased or improved or better to have to deal with that mental, emotional, trauma. They're better with a healthy gut, healthy immune system. So it's you can't separate them. You can't say, well, this person's depressed because they lost a loved one, a spouse at a very young age, or they lost a child, and they're depressed because of that. That's a trigger of depression, an emotional state, and people need to go through grieving, and they can heal from it. But why does one person heal so quickly and rapidly versus somebody else? Could there be in that individual who hasn't been as resilient to heal from those emotional traumas, a component to their immune system and their microbiome, and their gut health, and that's where, when you look at it, the gut is the second brain. I've helped a countless number of people with chronic depression and things like that, and mood disorders and anxiety disorders, and kids with ADHD. I don't treat those diagnoses. I treat the human being that's dealing with that, and sometimes it's question and answer. What was the triggers? When did it come on? What was going on? And it's crazy how sometimes it's like, oh wait, I had a knee surgery and I had to take a bunch of antibiotics, and then it came on after that. I just thought it was because that kind of ruined my basketball career, in high school, and I was bummed about that. But now I'm 30 some years old and still dealing with depression and it started then. And it's like, you're still bummed about basketball in high school? And I'm like, okay, if you really truly are. But it's like, I shouldn't be. Why am I still depressed? Circumstances like that. And I'm like, well, you took a bunch of antibiotics to have a knee surgery. That reduced your resiliency to recover from this emotional trauma because it wiped out good bacteria in your digestive tract. Let's look to your gut. And they're doing major studies on this stuff. And again, it takes, on average, just to get evidence into a textbook, which most medical textbooks are published by the pharmaceutical industry, published and paid for. So they don't want how you heal somebody. But even when a medical breakthrough is done and proven through science to have this amazing effect on people's lives, just to get into the medical textbooks to be taught, some of that information takes 17 years on average to get into the medical textbook. So then these medical physicians have to go through their schooling and so it's 20 plus years before it would ever get into practice when things are discovered. But that's, and then you wind up in this situation where it's like, I'm talking about things that people are like, oh, that's like new agey. No, it's like actually old information. Checking spinal curvatures and preventing people from having organs removed is old information. It's published in the 1930s. It's just poo-pooed on because there's a system that profits off of sickness and disease and chronic illness. If the medical system makes more and more money as you age, as you get sicker and sicker. But if they were to take care of the cause of the problem and promote health, then you would have a reduction in your profitability on that individual over their lifetime. But instead, if we treat symptoms, the stressors and the factors that cause the disease or the person to become unhealthy in the first place are still there. Symptoms are suppressed, and then so they get sicker because they still have the stressors, the causes.
Criminal.
So then they make more and more money. It is on the pharmaceuticals part. It is a criminal game. The opioid crisis is a criminal game.
Now, Pat had a question. Did you get it answered?
No.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, do we have time?
Yeah, we have a few minutes.
Okay. What you were just saying reminded me of. I have somebody close to me that recently, they're in their mid 40s. And just recently has had all these issues, probably over the last, 6 to 8 months.
Yeah.
Have had all these issues where they're like have these episodes where they get like real shaky and weak, and their head hurts, and they have gut and chest heaviness and pain, and all this stuff. So they've been in the ER like twice in the last week.
Yeah.
And they first time couldn't find nothing, sent them home. 2 days later they're back in there, And this time they did further tests, which first they thought they had gallbladder stones. Then they realized they did an ultrasound, found out no, must have been a shadow, but we do see kidney stones, and we think you need an upper and lower GI scope because we think this could be related to digestive issues and possibly ulcers. So, like, you know, I guess my fear is they're like, should this person, you know, if they have kidney stones, do they need to have surgery or what? You know,
Body can dissolve that.
what is it?
The body can dissolve those.
So they just need.
Yeah.
I mean, if
dissolve
that's
them and
something
pass
that
them.
you could help that
Yeah.
person with.
Yeah. And I mean, you got to look at like, okay, so if there's kidney stones, if there's gallbladder issues, if there's ulcers, if there's GI symptoms, if there's neurological symptoms, if there's symptoms of blood sugar regulation, you know,
And also panic attacks and stuff like that.
yeah, she's
Never
having
had it
all
before.
these multiple organ systems are starting to become symptomatic. You know, so as they're going through and they're evaluating ultrasound, all they're looking for is where they're at and what is developed. They're not looking for why it developed. You're not going to find why it developed
Right.
with the ultrasound. You know, and that's the mistake of healthcare is that in America is that they look for where a person's at. They don't evaluate for why they got there. Hey, where are you at right now? Do you have any stones? Well, you're not even looking at what causes stones. You're not even evaluating for it. You're not even discussing why stones would be there in the first place. Why not evaluate for those things? Work on those things, you know, that type of thing. In ulcers, I mean, people all talk about, you know, it's like you see in movies and different things, oh, I've got an ulcer, and it's always because they're stressed. Like, yeah, stress causes ulcers. Chiropractic's shown in research to heal ulcers on average 10 days sooner than medications.
Praise God.
And then if there is H. pylori, God's created. H. pylori is a opportunistic, sometimes a pathogenic bacteria within the digestive tract that can cause and is associated with types of ulcers. While a properly functioning GI tract would produce enough acid, keep that under control. But in times of low acid, which you produce less acid when you're stressed, or there's a stressor on your nervous system, which could be a spinal misalignment. And so, but H. pylori can be reduced as well as just as well as medications can in a head-to-head trial, licorice root. So it's like God gave us the medicines to help control when our bodies are unable to do it itself. But again, a good practitioner is not going to simply say, take licorice root.
Right.
Because if you're stressed and that's reducing the acid in your body's capability of keeping the microbiome in check and in balance, you need to take care of what is the stressor and causing that reduction in function of the body to keep the microbiome in balance and in check. The question always, because the lack of licorice root is not the cause of. Licorice root is a great herb to assist in that situation. I just recommended it to somebody the other day when we got our stool sample results back. You know, but again, her situation is one of the things we found with stool sampling, we can actually do testing for like celiac disease, and she was positive for celiac disease. So in essence, she's got an auto, and she's like, wow, so the food I've been eating for, like, you know, I believe the family's like Italian, and they love pasta. They're like, pasta noodles is like the staple in their diets, you know. And she was getting angular cheilitis, where it is basically a very reddening and almost cracking of the angles in the lips, but then it was getting into the chin and face. This is a young mother. And then under the eyes, and then on her hands would start cracking and peeling. And if you look it up, you know, and what was amazing is this young girl, in her situation, she was a virgin until, because I went through questions. I'm like, well, if you type that condition in, you've been diagnosed with it. Have they evaluated for HIV? Have they evaluated for chronic Epstein-Barr viral infections? Have they evaluated for intestinal infections? Infections that cause a weakened immune response and depletion of our body's raw materials, or there's a malnutrition type situation going on. I'm like, if we need to, we're going to have to. But, you know, she's like, I don't think my husband, we were both virgins before marriage and things like that. So I'm like, you would be at a really low risk of having those infections. So that's not my go-to first test. I'm not going to waste your money on that. If, God forbid, we can't see improvements in the next 3-6 months. And she had been being treated by a herbalist, Chinese herbalist, and they would make this blend of herbs and give them to her. And she's like, they would work for a time period, but like towards the end, they would go away. She was spending $600 on herbs every 3 weeks.
Scary.
And that's it. But she's getting well just by, and I even before test results, I'm just like, just eliminate seeds and grains and things like that, and eat organic fruits and vegetables, and get back to really healthy lean meats and organic meats. And I don't mean lean meats, because actually I was like in the healthy fat from the meats, and I put her on organ tissue supplements, and it's already improved before we even got her stool sample back, and we found H. pylori and celiacs, and it was like, okay, yeah, that's causing chronic inflammatory immune activation. Angiectasis is also associated with autoimmune disorders. And it was unique because it came on after the depot shot, which then there's this twist of, well, ladies, hormone medications, birth control like depot or birth control drugs are connected to the development of autoimmune conditions. And so, there's all these things, that played a part.
All right, so we're going to have you back because we got
So much. I mean,
I'm long-winded because I want people to grasp an understanding.
Yeah, no, I get that's
Because the understanding empowers people to do something about their health, So, because that's really what's going to help people. It's really what's going to heal people. It's really going to set people free,
Amen. And speaking of that, would you like to do our closing prayer, Miss Pat?
Sure.
All right.
Well, Father, we just thank you. Lord, you love us so much. You created us. You said you formed us in our mother's womb. We were fearfully and wonderfully made, Lord. And God, so we just thank you for that. We thank you for the wild doc, Lord God, that just, Lord, you've just given him so much wisdom. And God, he's helped so many, just like myself, Lord. That, Father, I think he saved my life. So I thank you for him. And I ask that, God, that you would just help all the listeners that are listening today that are desperate for answers and just need their health back, Lord God. You have all the answers. You created our bodies. You created the foods and the medicines, Lord, that are true and right. And so, Father, we thank you. We thank you for this hour, and we thank you for more to come, Lord God. We ask that, Lord, that you would bring peace to the hearts and the minds of those who are listening today, and to know that there is hope. In Jesus' name.
Amen. All right. Well, thank you both for being here. I appreciate that. And we will be back on Wednesday with the regular Go Show. We have Callie coming from Dig Deeper Fitness will be here. We'll see you out this weekend. Lots of fun stuff. Llewellyn tonight, Valentine Dance. Tomorrow, the workshop at Pastor Joe Ray's church, the AIM Church in White House. Murph's tomorrow night for Valentine's Dance. Monday, TFA potluck at the American Legion in Greenbrier at 6 p.m. Lots of fun stuff going on. We hope that you will get out and make some good memories with your families. And you have been listening to 1100 WSGI. God bless and make it a great day.